Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, Pete. Welcome back.
Hi, Ethan. How's it going?
Everything is good. How's your last week been?
Pretty good. Been catching up on a few shows, including the ones you recommended, Travelers. I'm all in so far.
All right. That sounds like a big discussion we need to have another day, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay. And have you caught the latest episode of Winning Time on HBO?
Yes. So at the time of recording, we've seen episodes 1 and 2, and
That's
the
right.
third one comes out in a day or two.
All right. I'm in. So we talked about this after the first episode, right? The series premiere.
That's right.
And I think I remember I gave it the recommendation of it seemed to be good enough to justify subscribing to HBO Max only for that show. But I think you were one notch lower than that, right?
No, actually, my point was that if we were to judge it on the basis of episode 1 alone, at the time, I said that yes, you should subscribe. So I also gave it a subscribe or a must watch, but I did caveat that by saying, let's see how the remaining 9 episodes or however many, I think it's 10 episodes in all, but I did caveat by saying, look, let's wait until the remaining 9 are before we, really give it a firm rating one way or another. But my feeling was that on the basis of how they filmed it and the style that they've chosen to portray that first season, I think it's going to be something that's not so much that even if you're not a basketball fan, I think you're still going to enjoy it.
So now that the second episode came out, are you adjusting your rating or you keep it the same?
So I must say, before we go into breakdown of the first 2 episodes, I must say that after having watched the second episode, I'm still in, but I would say that maybe my enthusiasm has kind of dropped a little bit.
Oh,
and I
why?
would say that it's a, mooch at the moment.
Oh,
I
what's
only
changed?
say that because
What's changed about the second episode?
All right, so let's do this. So let's do a spoiler alert now. So we're going to talk about the first 2 episodes.
Yes.
So I think the first episode was really good for the series because it was high energy. It was high energy. It was a little bit more exciting. It was a little bit more of a gut punch in a good way. It's kind of like a splash of cold water in your face. It refreshes you, right? And it was refreshing to see John C. Reilly as Dr. Buss. I think he's doing a very good job. I think it's just that the first episode was about how he kind of blags his way into buying the Lakers, right? Where he says, I have all this money, I can do it, but he doesn't really have any of the money or the cash. He ends up having to borrow the money from his wife or getting a guarantee from his wife to the banks or his ex-wife, I guess. And then you see that, his daughter wants to come on board as like an intern. And so that was a bit exciting, right? It almost felt like, I don't know, it felt exciting to see that how he's able to like almost con his way into buying this team, right? Including with that ending scene where the team owner tries to play hardball with him and tries to out-negotiate Buss by saying, well, no, I don't want it in property. I want it in all cash. And Buss calls him on his bluff. And, it was a nice game of poker that way, right? Or a nice game of chess that way. The second episode and this is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. I think it got a little bit bogged down by the backstory of Magic Johnson. Right? Because you see a little bit more about the drama that he's got at home because his mom isn't really happy with him about, about being a basketball player and more specifically about being such a flamboyant basketball player.
Yeah.
So, she's this woman who's, very religious and is very proper, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And
Very
she
conservative.
very
Yeah.
conservative, right? And whereas, Magic Johnson is absolutely not, and he's chasing after this girl, and he tries to appease his mom, and to appease his mom he buys her this like jacuzzi hot tub kind of thing.
A huge bathtub.
Right? So it's just and she's just, no matter what, she's just very dour about the whole thing, and she's kind of like a wet blanket. And props, she's doing a very good job, but I felt like that whole backstory, that entire thing, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's kind of not what I'm interested in seeing. Like, I want to see some of it, of course, because it's all interesting, but this is more about when I hear the show Winning Time is about the Lakers, I want to see more about the Lakers. Right? So the things that I found more interesting in that episode, in episode 2, for example, is we get introduced to the great Boston Celtics coach, Red Auerbach.
Yep, we do.
Right? And he turns out because this is a dramatization, because this is an Adam McKay project, I don't know what he was actually reported to be like. I haven't really done much digging on him, but he comes off as a complete douchebag, right? Mm-hmm. This super arrogant jerk who looks down at Dr. Buss, and he's like, you're never going to be a winner like me, because the moment you get what you want, you're on to the next thing, and everyone accuses him of that, right? Mm-hmm. And at this point, if you've never seen or known anything about Dr. Buss, this is new news for us, right, as audience viewers. Mm-hmm. So I found that dynamic relatively interesting. I thought the dynamic between Jeannie Buss, his daughter, and I can't remember the lady in the office that works with Dr. Buss.
Claire.
Claire. So
Yep.
I found that relationship or that dynamic very interesting. Yeah. And, you get to start to see the business side a little bit more as well. And, maybe it's because you and I have more of a finance background and, a business background. I found that kind of stuff very compelling, right? Where you try to see how they're trying to turn around the Coliseum, was it? What is it called?
Yes. The Forum.
So the Forum. They're trying to turn around the Forum, the stadium where these guys play, or the arena where these guys play, and to make it a profit center. So, I like that kind of thing. And I'm hoping we get to see more of the behind the scenes of the business and the operations, more so than we do of the personal drama of the players.
Yeah. So I take your, let's not say it's criticism, but I take your points in terms of there are some, slow scenes in the second episode. And I agree, that's not really what we're tuning in for. But I have to say, I'm keeping the same rating. And I found that there were two very compelling things that support that. And then I'd like to make an observation. Mm-hmm. So the first point is I echo your statement, which is I'm really fascinated by the entrepreneurial nature of Dr. Buss. And I know that this is a dramatization, so it may not, mimic, history precisely. But I found it really interesting. He was basically kind of an outsider, and he had something that he was seemingly the only person who really saw, the vision or the potential of this asset. And I really kind of liked his leadership style. He already, kind of promoted Claire, who historically was a woman in accounting and obviously, was not treated great in some other instances. He really encourages his employees, and I really kind of like that style. Again, I don't know if that's historically accurate or not, but I found it like a little bit inspiring that a lot of people were against him. He had a very clear vision, and he was really very motivating towards people and saying, hey, think outside the box. Look, I'll give you the resources. You tell me what you need to succeed. And I really enjoyed that part. The second thing I like about this show is it's very clean in terms of content, in terms of language. And that's not always the case on HBO. And it's not that I'm a prude when it comes to, that type of stuff. But it's nice that there's a show that really focuses only on, the story and the acting, and it doesn't try to obscure that with, lewd scenes or, unnecessary vulgarity and things like that, which I think is, to be honest, a little bit rare. I don't think that there's been any swearing in the show. There's been, I think, some very brief nudity, maybe in the opening scene. And obviously there's some, references to, to sex and partying and things like that. But for something that's on HBO, I thought it was pretty tame. And that might get into my third or my observation, which is it seems as though, who's the creator? It's Adams, right?
Adam McKay?
Yeah, Adam McKay. And it seems like he's very protective of the Lakers franchise. Like, it seems like he's really trying to portray them and Jerry Buss in a very good light.
Right.
But I have to say the same is not said for Jerry West. Like the Jerry West character, right? Played by Jason Clarke, who we were just talking about. Like, they really kind of diminish him a little bit. Not necessarily like his basketball exploits, but they make him kind of like a little bit like manic depressive.
Like
they make him like
jerk,
yeah,
right?
yeah. For someone who is the logo of the NBA, someone who is a Hall of Famer, who has so many accolades, they really kind of portray him as from like this very dysfunctional kind of household where his father is maybe an alcoholic or abused his mother. They just show him with a lot of demons. And maybe that's accurate, but I'm really a little bit surprised that they kind of did him dirty, where everyone else is portrayed in this almost like, like aura,
like this reverential
yes,
treatment, right?
And I'm really surprised that such an important Lakers figure is just kind of like, you find him like in his tighty whities, kind of lying on the floor. He's, wife kind of diminishes him and saying, look, you're always up, you're always down. I was really kind of surprised, that he was portrayed in such a negative way. And that's kind of interesting because I think like whenever you're doing one of these shows or series kind of based on a series of true events, it's really important how you portray people because it can have really like long-ranging implications, right? I mean, if you think back to The Social Network, right? The damage that movie has done to Mark Zuckerberg is incalculable, right?
Well, I feel like Mark Zuckerberg has also done damage to himself, right?
Absolutely. But I mean, that movie really makes him unlikable, unpopular, right? I mean, maybe he had plenty of time to kind of rehabilitate himself or, prove that to be true. But
he has. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I think at least in terms of public perception,
yes,
everyone initially just saw him as the creator of Facebook, right? Or let's put it maybe not everyone, but let's say the general public who didn't care to do any research or digging.
Yes.
That film probably exposed his character flaws and ambition.
Yeah.
Right. And then instead of doing damage control, I would go so far as to say that he's gone out of his way to kind of prove that movie is 100%
He's embraced
accurate.
He's embraced that role.
And maybe even said, hey, maybe we didn't go far enough in this movie, right? Because there's some of the things that he's done and said, and obviously some of some of these are, Facebook policies. So I don't want to put my biases out there, but like he's not really helped his own case, right? Yeah.
So I have to say, Jerry Buss is obviously portrayed in just the most flattering way possible, right? I mean, you see him, he's obviously a little bit of a womanizer, a little bit of a partier, a little bit of a schmoozer and drinker, but he treats everybody very respectfully, especially, we talk about
and
Claire,
it feels a bit anachronistic, I think. And it almost seems like he's a man ahead of his time.
Yes.
And how much of that is true, I don't know. Right? Like the one scene I remember that stuck out to me in that first episode was they're sitting in the conference room at the Lakers office, and somebody, I think it was his accountant friend, who asks Claire to make him a drink, right? A gin and tonic or something like that. And Bus goes, well, you can make it yourself, right? And would that happen? Did it happen? I don't know. Obviously, none of us know.
Yeah.
Would that have actually happened? I don't know,
Yeah.
but it seemed a little out of, not touch, but out of time for that, right?
Yeah.
So much so that even that I remember this, and that's not to say I think women should be making drinks, not at all. But my point is, in that era, certainly that's what a lot of men, especially in the sports world, or at least in business in general, would have felt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in that way, if you look at comparing it to like Mad Men, I think it was very much more accurate, which is to say, hey, Mad Men didn't think twice of telling the women of the show to do whatever they needed to be done.
Yeah.
Or even, there was that one scene where a kid gets smacked by another father at a party, right? And the kid's father was like, well, you deserved it, right? He's a man. He knows what he's talking about. And I don't care that you're my son. If he slapped you, he did it for a reason, right? Which today would never happen.
What a rough and tumble world it was back then.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. That's another discussion, but still. Anyway, but I fully take on your point. I think you're right. I think how much of this is glamorizing the past versus how much of this is kind of like deifying, if that's the right word, of certain members of the Lakers. Yeah. Whether that's because McKay is a fan, whether that's because, hey, he's also, living in Los Angeles and he's going to be a part of the cultural zeitgeist by talking about the Lakers. Yeah. Then, there's a certain element of maybe him also being like, well, let's make them come out looking a bit better than they actually were. Right? Yeah.
I mean, I understood when they showed the transition of ownership. I mean, again, who's to say historically whether Jack Kent Cooke was really a jerk? But they really made him look like a jerk. And they really made Jerry Buss seem like the everyman who worked in the mines in Wyoming and understood manual labor and could relate to people. I understood that's part of the Laker lore. And that's probably okay to include. But that's a little bit why I'm so surprised that Jerry West was just so portrayed in such a negative way. I mean, they didn't even portray him as like a psychopath, just obsessed with winning, or someone who just, really had this vision for basketball that he couldn't get his mind around, with Magic Johnson, or this very great relationship with, his other point guard, Norm Nixon, who he like, mentored or something. He just came across as kind of like this alcoholic, person who just had like so many demons. I'm really a little bit surprised that they put him in such a spot. But maybe that's part of the drama that they needed. They needed a good foil kind of in the first 2 episodes, and now
and this probably actually addresses my question about Red Auerbach, right? Which is, was he such a jerk? I don't know, but the Lakers, at least in season 1, need a defined villain character, right? Or they need someone that they can like dunk on, literally and figuratively. And and it's going to be Red Auerbach, because we all know how the first season of the actual Lakers dynasty started, right? So
we do.
It is going to be, I think it's going to be them probably using that to set up a villain figure, which in this case, in the team, it's a little bit like Jerry West, but like as an organization, that villain figure is Red Auerbach, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then the next episode you said is coming out later this week,
within the next 2 days. Yeah, within the next 2 or 3 days.
So we'll do another breakdown then next week on our next episode, and let's see if we maintain consistent ratings, if you're falling a little bit more, if I can keep my level of excitement for the show.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Pete.
Thanks, Ethan.
We'll see you next time, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.